Part 3.2, Critical Remarks. On Letter A, the Cardinal's Introduction. In his short introduction, Cardinal Wojtyła says that the conciliar text to follow from the Pastoral Constitution Gaudium et Spes, number 22, supports his thesis that the love of Christ as the bridegroom of the Church goes out to all men. Vatican II has made this truth the focal point of the Pastoral Constitution. Hence, universal salvation is a central message of the Council. We must observe, however, that not a word about the love of a bridegroom is mentioned in the conciliar text. The Cardinal himself, in his own commentary on this text, does not return to this theme of bridegroom-bride. Perhaps he is trying to prove or verify the thesis of universal salvation, which constitutes the theological core of the mystical image of bride and bridegroom in his meditation by means of the council text. That is not the case either. Universal salvation is not proved at all, but is merely assumed. Thus, in his commentary on the council text, the Cardinal says no more about that part which is supposed to contain and prove his thesis, a travesty of interpretation which, however, is no isolated instance. On letter B, the conciliar text from Gaudium et Spes, number 22. Cardinal Wojtyła deems the written council text Gaudium et Spes, number 22, itself, quote, very clear. See letter C, his commentary. Perhaps very clear for the Cardinal, but not so clear from the standpoint of classical theology. For instance, what does the conciliar text mean by the sentence, quote, He is the image of the unseen God, Colossians 1:15. He is the perfect man who has restored to the children of Adam the likeness to God, similitudinem, which was distorted, deformatam, at the very beginning by sin. End quote. According to biblical and theological language, the expression, quote, sons of Adam, means simply all mankind. Therefore, Christ, according to the text, restored all men to the likeness of God. Since the similitudo divina means the supernatural likeness of God, gratia gratum faciens, i.e., sanctifying grace, which Christ restored to the, quote, sons of Adam, the statement of the council could easily be understood in the sense of universal salvation. The supernatural likeness of God is allotted to all men. Translator's footnote. In the forthcoming pages, one should bear in mind the biblical passage referring to man's creation in the image and likeness of God, Genesis 1:26. In theology, image regards man's natural resemblance to God, i.e., in virtue of his spiritual soul, endowed with intelligence and free will. On the other hand, likeness regards man's supernatural resemblance to God, i.e., by the free gift of divine grace by which we are made children of God. See Romans 8:15, Galatians 4:7. End footnote. On the other hand, the same sentence of the Council could be understood merely in the sense of the objective universality of salvation. That is surely how the overwhelming majority of Council Fathers understood it. The sentence could only be said to refer to universal salvation if the Council had thereby intended to teach not only the objective universality of the work of redemption, but also the subjective universality of the realization of redemption in every individual man, namely, the application of the fruits of the redemption to all men. Various interpretations are possible. In addition to the confusion mentioned above, the Council text contains a distressing inaccuracy. See Ratzinger, which immediately becomes apparent when we examine it in the light of classical teaching. In the wake of St. Irenaeus, the scholastics developed the teaching on man's likeness to God as a classic paradigm for the teaching on grace, which, by using definite notions, presents the, quote, union of man with God as the fruit of redemption. According to Catholic teaching, the, quote, union of man with God means, quote, partaking of the divine nature. 2 Peter 1:4. By that is meant a physical communion of man with God. Expressed in scholastic terms, quote, this consists in an accidental unification which is accomplished by a created gift of God. This assimilates the soul to God and unifies it with him in a manner transcending all created powers. Man, who is by nature, as to his body, an incorporation of a divine idea, a vestigium Dei, and as to his spirit, an image of the divine spirit, an imago Dei, becomes by sanctifying grace similitudo Dei, that is, becomes elevated to a higher supernatural grade of assimilation to God. End quote. Ludwig Ott, page 255. According to Catholic teaching, the sons of Adam, i.e. all men, lost the similitudo Dei through original sin, and the imago Dei became wounded. By the application of the fruit of the redemption, which is accomplished through justification, the similitudo Dei, gratia sanctificans, which man lost, is then restored to him, and the wounded imago Dei is healed by its powers, gratia medicinalis. Translator's footnote. Man's nature is wounded through original sin. His mind is darkened, his will is weakened, his passions enkindled to revolt against God's law. See Romans 7:15-24. This wounded state of man's nature is also designated by the all-embracing term concupiscence, which remains in the soul even after baptism. In practice, that means our fallen human nature, which we have to struggle against every day with the help of God's grace, obtained by prayer, good works, and the sacraments. End footnote. On the other hand, the council text says that Christ has restored the, quote, likeness to God, similitudo, which was distorted by the first sin, deformata, end quote, to all of the sons of Adam. In that case, the likeness of God was not lost due to the first sin, but only distorted by it. Joseph Ratzinger is quick to point out this lack of precision in his commentary on our council text, 1968. There we read the following, quote, the fact that the concept similitudo is used here to mean the restoration of the likeness of God in sinful man could well be a reminder of Irenaeus, who, by his distinction of imago and similitudo, anticipated the later distinctions of the natural and supernatural resemblance to God. And yet it seems peculiar that one portrays the similitudo only as deformata, whereas, according to classical teaching, the similitudo is lost and the imago only wounded. Such an expression, which in scholastic language one must here characterize as inexact, once again goes to show how little the council wanted to enter into these technical details of the scholastics, and how much it desired to express more basic views which everyone held in common. End quote. On this Ratzinger commentary, We must, however, remark that the confusion between imago and similitudo Dei is not simply an inaccuracy which disregards, quote, scholastic language, but rather an all-out attack on a fundamental dogma of the Church, which forms the basis of the entire Catholic teaching on salvation, namely, man's biblically attested absolute need of divine grace for his salvation, since man is stained by original sin, a dogma which the Council of Trent clearly defined with all its implications. The alleged inaccuracy by scholastic standards is in reality an error against Catholic dogma, and the floodgate for all kinds of theories of universal salvation.